Empower Hour may be considered attorney advertising. Prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome. Susan Freedman is a lawyer practicing at 399 Knollwood Road, White Plains, New York, and can be reached at 914-948-1400.
Hi, everybody. It's Empower Hour. My name is Susan Freedman, and I'm happy to have you listen to me and to my guest today. My guest today is Jason Wilson. He is the branch manager. Well, Jason, you tell us.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Susan. I am the branch manager for Julia Beefy Sotheby's International Realty in Scarsdale, New York. And I also have a show right here on called How's the Market that's every Sunday from 8 to 9. And Susan was on my show probably over a month ago now, and it's my opportunity to be on hers.
Well, thank you so much for coming. Now, before we get into the substance of the show, tell us a little bit about your background, Jason.
Well, before I was in real estate, I was in retail. I had a Nextel Sprint business in Thornwood. I had that business for about 7 years, and then I sold it in 2007 and then went into real estate management about a year later. I already had my license for a couple of years. So I was a real estate teacher, managed offices up in northern Westchester, and then I came down to Scarsdale about 3 years ago.
And you handle transactions and you manage the office, right?
I mean, I'm a hands-on manager. I don't sell anymore, but I do have clientele. I just refer that to the office. But I'm very hands-on, so I'm on the phones with attorneys every day, dealing with listing contracts, dealing with the commission bills, dealing with negotiations, go out on listing presentations all the time with the agents to meet the clients, go to meetings for price corrections. So I'm selling at a bigger volume, but I'm not the person's name that's on every listing, so.
Keeping deals together.
Keeping deals together, yep. I want to know when the bump in the road, not when the crash happens, because it's tougher to recover from that.
Well, and hopefully there never is a crash, because you can predict that and steer away from it.
Exactly.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like you to give everybody your phone number in case they want to get in touch with you.
My number is 914-713-2164. It's 914-713-2164. And if anybody wants to call in, our number here is 914-693-5700. That's 693-5700.
So you can call in and ask Jason anything you want right now.
Yeah.
And you have an email address.
Yep, jason.wilson@juliab.com. That's jason.wilson@JULIAB as in boy, FEE.com.
So today I have a couple of questions that I bet listeners might ask if they had the opportunity. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about what is the difference between a listing broker, a selling broker, and a buyer's broker. And for the life of me, I could never understand how anybody could be a buyer's broker. So you explain it to me today.
All right. So the best way to explain it, I mean, there's a couple different ways of doing it, is I always rewind back to when I bought my first place in 2002. When I bought my first property, you didn't see the New York State disclosure form coming out as often. And when I bought the property, I didn't realize that the agent that was driving me around I was following, who was showing me houses, was not really representing me. They were actually representing the seller. And they were a seller's agent. They actually worked in the same office, so it would have been a dual agency.
So let me interrupt you for a minute. So the listing agent is the person the seller goes to and they say, I'm going to sell my house. I want you to put it on the market. That's the listing agent.
That's always a listing agent. That person does not change their roles or titles or anything like that. When you're a buyer, there's actually 3 ways a person can represent you, where you become a customer versus a client, and there's a couple of different options with that. But when it's with a seller, they only have one option. Listing broker, seller's agency, seller's agent, that's it. There's only one option.
Okay. So now how did you get in touch with this person who was driving you around?
It was somebody had referred me. It was a friend of theirs.
So
this
you
was
called
before I was
them
in real estate. Yeah, I called them up. I said I wanted to see some places. I was probably one of the easiest clients because she only had to show me 3, and then I purchased the property after that.
Well, and I was easier because I only had to see 1.
Okay, there you go. You even easier than me.
I have very low standards. But you could just as easily have walked in to a brokerage house and somebody would be sitting there and you'd say, do you have any houses in X neighborhood, or do you have any houses in X price range, right?
I did that back in 2002. I mean, Realtor.com was probably the main site. There's so many more other websites out there. So we actually looked in Connecticut first, and that's how we We went to a listing brokerage company. We saw one listing. We went to that company, and then they showed us a couple houses. But Connecticut law was totally different than New York, because even when we presented an offer on a property, we had to present a 1% binder just to present an offer. And the deal didn't wind up going through, and that was fine. The seller didn't want to sell at the price that we were negotiating with. And you know what? Everything happens for a reason. So I stayed in Westchester.
And you got your 1% back.
I got my 1% back, yeah. But in New York, I wasn't familiar with real estate. I was in retail at the time, and I wanted to go with somebody that I could trust. I kind of knew of the woman. It was a friend of my sister-in-law's. It was her friend who was also an agent. And she said, why don't you call this person? And we went out and saw some places.
Now, she was a selling agent.
She was a selling agent, but back then in 2002, it was that was the practice. A buyer, no one was really buyer's agents really then, I see. And then throughout the county in Westchester, that's transitioned. Now, there's still parts of Long Island that still do seller's agency.
Okay, so can you explain to our listeners what a seller's agent is?
Perfect, yes. So a seller's agent, basically when you're a buyer, a person will pull out a New York State disclosure form. They're supposed to do it every time. And there's 3 ways that you can be represented, okay? One is a seller's agent, which basically means you have no representation. They're supposed to give you loyalty and trust, but at the same time, they actually work for the seller. And just because either in any of these situations, you're always the person is compensated by the seller does not mean compensation is representation. It's not. One has nothing to do with the other, okay? Second option.
So wait. They're supposed to give you loyalty and trust, but they work for the seller.
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that, please?
Basically, the best way to go. Well, first of all, if a seller compensates a seller's agent, they're actually opening themselves up for vicarious liability. That's what I was taught. This is what I was taught on my side, is that when that happens, it actually opens up more liability to a seller when they have the buyer not being represented by a buyer's agent. So that's on the legal side. I mean, anyway, everyone gets sued if something goes wrong at the end of the day.
Well, that's always true.
Yes. But that's one of the things that I had learned on when I was teaching agency or learned agency was the vicarious liability. Okay.
Let's give a concrete example of the difference between a seller's agent and a buyer's agent. Each one to explain buyer's agent, and then we'll give a concrete example.
I'll give you a perfect example where I got burnt because the person was a seller's agent and they weren't a buyer's agent. Okay. Now, if a buyer's agent really does their job correctly, they should be out there doing due diligence for you. They should be making that extra step and verifying the property taxes for you. They should be making that extra step to go to the town hall and verifying there's no open permits and that the COs are in place and all that stuff before you sign those contracts.
But doesn't a good listing agent do that first?
Yes, but that good listing agent may not always provide that information over to a buyer's agent. The buyer's agent wants to do that as a backup because the vicarious liability falls on their brokerage house at the end of the day if something happens. Not to say that everyone's not going to get sued. Another thing, too, is that a seller's agent, if you say to a seller's agent, okay, let's say the house is on the market for $350, and you say, you know what, I can pay $350, but I want to start at $340. Well, you just gave everything up. You just told the person what your bottom number is. They don't have that loyalty to you. That actual loyalty and that confidentiality is going directly to the seller. There's no confidentiality like you do with a buyer's agent. With a buyer's agent,
so they're obligated to tell the seller that you'll go to $350.
Yes, they're obligated to tell the seller. Where a buyer's agent, they're supposed to give you comparables, almost like a mini comparative market analysis, like as if you were listing a home, to give you what the comparables that are in the neighborhood to help you negotiate the price. And they can know your top number, they can know your bottom number, they can know all that stuff, and that trust is there and that confidentiality is there.
And they cannot reveal it.
They cannot reveal it. No.
Without your permission, of
Exactly,
course.
Without your permission.
So you're in a better bargaining position.
Yes. And then there's a third option, because a lot of agencies or say sellers do not allow seller's agency anymore, let a buyer being represented by a seller's agent. So they opened up a third option, which is not explored all the time, called a broker's agent. And what that does is on the vicarious liability, it stops at the listing broker. So somebody who works for the same brokerage house, so let's say a Julia B. Fee agent can never be a broker's agent. But the other way, but anybody who also works for another company, if they wanted to. But basically, at the end of the day, today, when a buyer sits down with an agent and they give the 3 options to them, there's no reason why someone would not want a buyer's agent. Even though they're not technically paying them, I would want all the options in my favor with a buyer's brokerage.
So a broker's agent is I haven't even heard this term. A broker's agent is working for the broker?
The listing brokerage company, yes.
So the broker's agent is like a listing agent.
Exactly. It's almost like a selling agent, but without the liability going directly to the seller.
I see. So that just protects the seller. It doesn't really do anything for the buyer.
Yeah, it lets the old selling agents that represented buyers that were lazy and didn't do due diligence, okay, it allows them to still have an option with the broker's agency.
Wow. So this all seems a little complicated, and I'm pretty familiar with the area. So I got to think that listeners are finding this more complicated even than I do.
Yeah, in other states they have transactional brokerages, which is just on that transaction. That's a whole other kind of
all right, so we're
itself.
getting ready to come up on a break, and I think after we come back, I'm going to ask your advice to people who want to buy and who want to sell, and what kind of agency they should select, why, and how to do it.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you. Hi, here we are back with Empower Hour. I'm Susan Freedman, and we have our guest today, Jason Wilson.
How are you doing today?
And if you have any questions for me or for Jason, please call in 914-693-5700. If you want to reach Jason at his office phone during the week, what's your number, Jason?
914-713-2164. That's my direct number.
And my number is 914-948-1400. Okay, so now we have, before the break, we were talking about all different kinds of agents, and really, why don't we just get down to what kind of agent do you want to ask for, and what can you expect?
A professional agent. No, that's for which one? The listing or the buy side?
Well, let's start with, you want to sell your house. You are going to get a listing agent.
You know, listing agent, you really want to do your homework. I mean, one of the things that's nice with social media and everything else I try to explain to agents all the time today is that you need to, put yourself out there, because people are researching listing agents like they're researching when they're buying a TV at Best Buy or when they're looking up for an attorney. They go to the person's agent's website or go to get additional information. What I say to sellers out there, don't always go by, especially where the market is right now, don't always go by how many listings an agent has. Go by how long they've done the business for, and what's the quality of how they're going to go out and market the property. And make sure there's chemistry, because I've seen some sellers that just have no chemistry with some agents out there or some top producers out there, or they don't like the experience. And I'll give you an example. I had a seller come to my office yesterday, and they're listed with another brokerage house. And he said to me, would you mind, I know I'm in a contract with another company. He walked into the firm. He goes, but I just feel like they're not marketing the property properly. And he says, I want to be able to, touch this type of buyer and that type of buyer and this type of buyer. And I feel like they've done nothing to do that. And I said, okay. I said, well, if you're going to ask me, and I'm not going to lie to you and say I have all these lists of relocation companies and corporate people to find, a person for this property, I don't have that stuff. But let's just talk about a couple of things before we even go forward on the way your property is being marketed. First things first is the property's pictures on here are old photos. This cannot be the same photos that you've had, now. And he goes, well, what do you mean? I said, well, there's a watermark on the top of the photo, and it's for the old MLS when it used to be called HGMLS, and it's not Empire. It's now Empire MLS. So, or should I say it's the opposite? But still, those are old photos. I said, and they're garbage. I said, so if you're out there attracting people, it's the internet buyer. It's not just what's in the newspaper. Newspaper is nice. It's tangible. It makes the seller very happy that they see their house in the paper, or like someone said, you're only in the New York Times twice, when your house is for sale and when you pass away. But that's besides the point. But what I looked at it is, he says, would you come see the house? I said, sure. So we went to the house, and I went to look at it, and I remembered the write-up that was online for the property. I said, well, first things first, one of the things that jumps out to me right off the bat is you have 2 master bedrooms, or master suites. He goes, what defines a master suite? I said, you have a first floor master suite and you have a second floor master suite. They both have their own bathrooms. They're all huge, large bathrooms. They have these huge walk-in closets. You have 2 master bedrooms. I said, so it's great for an extended family. Maybe it's a family that's coming in, and they have family that visits several times a year, and maybe they come for a couple of months. They have their own wing, with their own office and everything. I said, that feature's not being discussed, and there's no photos.
College students coming back.
The college students Susan's coming back. Everything was updated. His kitchens and his baths. He had bidets everywhere. He had a nice sized backyard. It wasn't just a postage stamp, so he had a little bit more grass than some houses that I've seen in Scarsdale. And he said to me, we went through the house, maybe it was about a half an hour, going through it, and I was telling him some touch-up stuff that he needs to do. And he goes, I never realized that. I never thought of it that way about 2 master bedrooms. I said, well, the write-up is very short and sweet. It just says house in Scarsdale and Green Acres. Doesn't say anything else other than that. It doesn't go into any more detail about the bedrooms and baths. I said, but what you need to understand is that your agent, first of all, has to have passion in the house, just like you have passion in the house. And you need to make sure that they're telling the right story. Now, we are limited in characters because we can't write, a 6-page story or, a book about your home.
Get back to Christmas's past.
Yeah. I mean, but, you have to make sure that they express it just as much as you. Now, I know there's some sellers I've spoken to where they go over the top, like, well, I don't like the angle of this picture, and then we've changed things 16 times over. That's a little too much. But just make sure that your first of all, your agent is passionate. They're full-time. They're really reachable. Not just reachable when they first list the property for you, because I know there's agents out there. They're great when they're about to get the listing, and then once they win the listing, you lose all contact with them until it comes time to expire and they get a price reduction.
I think that's the same for all kinds of professionals, because I hear complaints about other lawyers. And actually, I get a lot of clients who come to me after having had another lawyer, and my lawyer doesn't return my phone calls. So they know that I will return those phone calls. But, for something as simple as returning a phone call.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the biggest thing, too, is follow-up. That's on a buy side or a list side is, it amazes me. We're in a business, a people business, and why is it so tough to follow up? Now, there's sometimes those tough calls, maybe you have some bad news and you don't want to make that phone call, so you try to do an email. But like I've said so many times over, no matter what the personality of Generation X or Y, there's so much more you can get done on a phone call. Instead of 25 emails, make that 5-minute phone call. You'll get a lot done and be more appreciated.
Well, and not to mention the fact that in email, you can't really, you can't express the same emotion in an email, and it can so easily be misread. And sometimes people just don't even get it. You think you sent an email, you think somebody got it, and they didn't get it.
Exactly.
Now, most people get 99% of their emails, but if you're in that 1%, you haven't made your communication, and you don't know it because nobody wrote you back. You don't know.
Yeah.
All right, so go ahead.
So that's on the listing side. Is you want to find a broker that's professional. They work with a great company that's going to really market the home. And so it could be a big company, big brokerage house. It could be a small brokerage house. Really just make sure that the agent is going to put you on top priority. There was a discussion about the other day with a seller is how many listings should a broker really have? And what's the maximum amount for them to service you properly? And I said, what, that's really to ask the broker. And what's the maximum they like to carry on the way they can service their clients? Because in maybe Southern Westchester, a top producer, or let's just say an agent that maybe carries 10 to 15. And then when you go to Northern Westchester, they can carry 30 to 40, but they have a whole team behind them. So it's really hard to say it all depends on how someone can handle it. Some people are great taskers, and they can basically go 24/7, 365, and their life is real estate, and they can carry that many listings. But at the same time, someone who carries 30 listings and has only sold 2 this year, I don't know how much I really want to work with that brokerage, because all he's really doing is he's looking for numbers, and there's nothing actually happening. It's not getting results. So if someone maybe only has 5 listings, but maybe they have 10 in contract already, they've actually had 15 listings so far this year. That's a good agent.
And that's a good number.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a good success rate. So, okay, now we've talked about sellers. Let's talk about buyers. So you were a buyer. You were talking about your experience as a buyer. Mm-hmm. Let's say I wanted to go buy something, which I don't, for whoever's listening, but very happy where I am. But let's just say I wanted to make a change.
Okay.
And my children are grown. They're out of the house. So I'm just walking by a place, and I maybe see a couple of pictures in the window, and I think, wow, there's an idea. And I walk in. So what is happening really when I walk in?
Well, one of the things that's actually happening now, Susan, is that people are, because of online and the way they seem to be going directly to the listing agents, because they feel the listing agents may know a little bit more of the property than just hiring a buyer's agent. And that sometimes is the case where the listing agent, or they think they could save some money because the guy's getting two commission checks and they can negotiate it. So we've seen that trend. But remember, you don't have representation. That person does represent the seller. But on a buyer's agent, I love doing buyers more than the listing side because I felt like I had more control and I enjoyed the relationship part. With a seller, you don't have as much contact as you do with a buyer. A buyer, you kind of like, you start the process, they maybe look at 30, 40 homes, and then you finally narrow down to the one house that they really like.
You become a member of their family.
Exactly. So I like
and know everything about them, too.
Exactly. And I liked the buyer's process. But what I say is that to a lot of buyers out there is that a good buyer's agent is not always a great listing agent because it's really two totally different ways of doing business. A listing agent is a great marketeer. They're all about marketing and about exposure and trying to get the most for your property. A buyer's agent...
But not really about people.
It's not really about people. Okay, but with a great buyer's agent, they're out there, they're engaged, they know the inventory up and down. They really have a better gauge of the market. They're doing their due diligence more. And they kind of have a feel. And usually sometimes they're working with multiple buyers in that same price range. So if maybe one buyer didn't like it, it's an opportunity for another buyer. And they seem to be more in touch with the inventory.
Well, on that point, so now if I'm working with an agent and I'm a buyer and he has another buyer, maybe his other buyer likes the same place I like, and doesn't he have a conflict there?
He does have a conflict. He can disclose. There are certain companies that have disclosure forms there that say that this may happen where they'll have two buyers at the same time. But usually from which buyer is willing to actually go up more. But I always say to my agents, if that circumstance happens, you need to disclose it so that both buyers know that they have interest in the same property.
Well, but then wouldn't I want to get a different agent?
Not necessarily. Some just want to stick with the same agent, and, there's the fiduciary. Now you're in that fiduciary situation. It's not really a dual agent, but you're in that fiduciary of you can't tell one buyer what the other buyer is willing to pay. Usually in most circumstances, buyer 2 or buyer 1, whichever it is, there is a stopping point on it. Or there's might be not as much interest in it.
So from what I'm understanding from you, the broker himself, the agent himself, would be able to say to me, I have somebody else. He really seems like he's more interested in this property than you are. Maybe I should show you some other properties.
No. I'm just saying in your mind, you're not disclosing that. You just disclose that. I just want to let you know this property is going highest and best, and I'm actually putting 2 bids in. I have 2 buyers, both at the same time. I've given you both the same advice. I've given you both the same comparables. I'm not going to disclose, what you both can afford, but I'm just telling you it's fair, but back and forth. That's it.
That seems like a little tricky. So we're going to take a little break now, and then we're going to come back and talk some more about agency. And I think we're going to talk about lawyers as agents.
All right.
Okay. Hi, it's Susan Freedman. We're back with Empower Hour. And if you would like to call in, our number is 914-693-5700. So you can call and ask anything you want. And today our guest, Jason Wilson. Jason, give everybody your phone number if they'd like to call you after the show.
914-713-2164. 914-713-2164.
And you are with?
Julie Beefy, Sotheby's International Realty in Scarsdale, New York.
And my office number is 914-948-1400. Now, I've always heard about, I have never tried this, it's really not that interesting to me personally, but I've always heard that lawyers can collect a broker's commission if they are involved in a deal. And I think there are a lot of lawyers who are interested in doing that, and I'd like you to explain that to the listeners.
Well, New York State law says that by whatever the law is, it basically says that an attorney is by default a broker. Now, usually...
Can I just jump in there for a minute?
Go ahead. You're the lawyer, so yeah.
Well, because lawyers are licensed by the state, the thought is that you don't need to license them again because if they were going to do something wrong, you could take away their attorney's license. Okay. You wouldn't have to take away their broker's license. Mm-hmm. Okay, shoot.
Now, some brokers, attorneys also go the extra effort and pay the $150 and become a licensed broker so that they can have licensees under them.
But they don't have to take the course. They don't
No.
have to pass a test. They just fill out the form.
They just fill out the form. That's it. Now, some of them do that because then they can actually be easily verified on the Department of State to show that they have a broker's license. So in case they call up a real estate company and say, okay, I'm looking to buy a house for myself, or I'm driving around with this buyer client of mine who I'm going to represent both sides, which I've heard different opinion letters on that, about them duly collecting a buyer's agency commission and also representing them.
Is my understanding that you shouldn't do that?
You shouldn't do it, but there's no law. That's just a letter from the bar or something like that I've heard about.
You know, anytime there's a letter from the bar, you really should listen.
Yeah. But one of the things I have been seeing is two things. One is we have seen definitely some Manhattan attorneys coming up and either referring their clients, looking for a referral fee for their buyer clients, and just because they are technically licensed and they want the fee, whatever it is, let's say it's 20 or 25% of the buyer's commission. We've seen that. We've seen attorneys who are representing themselves looking to buy real estate here in Westchester County, and then they say, well, what is the buyer's fee? What is the compensation for a buyer's agent? And they want to know if they can use that money to go towards the purchase price. We've seen some situations where they've said that, we've negotiated a price, and they go, okay, so what's my compensation? But you just told me you waived the fee. So that's one of the things we've seen on that side. But no, we've definitely seen attorneys who have asked for a referral fee and referred us clients. And I've gotten clearance as long as they're disclosing it to their client. I've been told it's okay, but I'm not a lawyer.
So this complicates, in my mind, this complicates the transaction, doesn't it?
Yeah, because, well, why did you refer, let's say, why did you refer me, Susan? Let's say, I'm not saying you're doing it, but let's just say Susan referred me a client, and said, here's, Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, and they have a listing, and, I'm getting a compensation. Now, were you looking for your client's best interest by referring me, or were you looking for your pocket? Why you referred me? That's where I get some situation. Like I've had over the years, inspection companies or these types of companies go, I'll pay you a referral fee if you refer clients. And I said, you know what? I don't want anything because I'm referring you for the reason because this person is the best at what they do, and I'm referring you because they're going to get the job done for you. I'm not doing it for any type of money. It's because I'm giving a recommendation. When I had my retail company and I would have a guy come into me and say, listen, I have so many friends that are looking to buy Nextel or Sprint phones. What do you think about doing a referral program? And I'm like, you know what? If that's how you're going to be motivated to refer me for clients, then I haven't done my job, and I'm willing to do that. You can go down to the store down the street or anywhere else if you're looking for those types of referral fees.
I can't tell you how much I respect that decision. I am in a position where people place trust and confidence in me on a daily basis for all kinds of things, and all kinds of personal things, particularly very personal things. So in the course of representing somebody, let's say in a divorce case, they might want to ask me, do I know a realtor? Or they might want to ask me, do I know a psychiatrist? Or do I know a psychologist? Or sometimes I'll represent somebody on a closing and they'll ask me, do I know a babysitter? Of course, my kids are so old now, I don't know any babysitters. But I would never think to refer somebody that I wouldn't use for my own personal business, and I would never, ever want to take any money for it because that's not what it's about. It's about getting your client the best possible service. And if your client were to find out, even if you told them, or if they found out from some third party that you were getting money for making these referrals, wouldn't their trust and confidence in your referral and in fact in your service be destroyed?
Yeah.
I don't. To me, it's not only self-defeating. It's not a good idea. I don't do it. I'm glad to hear that you don't do it. So now you have all these people coming up, let's say from Manhattan, not to trash Manhattan particularly, basically what you're saying is with their hand out.
Yeah, no, there's people with their hand. I mean, it's not just Manhattan, but it's just in general, is that you're seeing that as the market is getting better, and attorneys, maybe I don't know what type of money these attorneys are making on their general practices, but they're seeing, you know what, the market's getting better. I have an opportunity to cash in. I'm tired of seeing the big checks crossed over to the real estate companies. How can I get in? How can I get my fee up somehow, some way? And maybe they're real estate attorneys, and it's a very competitive market. And I'm not saying that all attorneys. I'm just telling you,
competitive market.
I'm just saying that in general, what's happening now is that you're starting to hear the verbiage more is, I'm a broker and, I could technically collect a fee. Well, I do remind them sometimes, it's not that I would put it into effect, is that technically you're not a member of our multiple listing service. So our multiple listing service, whatever we're paying the cooperating fee is only to our members. But I would never put my seller in a situation that we weren't going to show it. But what I do is I say to my agents is if this person is saying they are representing themselves or they're representing a buyer, you want to be there for this transaction, no matter what price point it is for that showing, because it's not a realtor. They don't follow by the code of ethics. Okay, they're not a part of the National Association of Realtors, which is a whole different subject in itself of how they have to be following.
And they
that
have
code.
their own show on this channel.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not the same type of situation. So where's going to put the client in the best interest? I mean, not to say that just because someone's an attorney, they're the most upstanding citizen in the world. There's plenty of people that are we just had a situation right now where we found an attorney that was representing a client that may possibly have gotten in trouble a couple of years ago, and it's still pending, so he hasn't lost his lawyer's license anymore. So when the client found out, let's just say the attorney is going to be changed over. So,
well, that's a relief. But in addition to that, I can tell you that as an attorney, my training is so different, and my experience is so different than people who are knowledgeable about showing houses. My orientation is much more towards the title than the structure, things that I would never see if I were standing right in front of it. So if I can't believe that other attorneys, unless they're really good at being engineers also, how could they show a house like a broker could? They couldn't. So what you're saying, I think, is that the listing broker winds up doing two jobs.
Exactly. And only get paid for one. But you know what? Sometimes the listing broker winds up doing two jobs, sometimes with even some buyer's agents. So I can't really fully, just blame it on someone who's trying to represent themselves. There's some buyer's agents that are not that great quality. I mean, one of the things that we're seeing right now is that because with the newer generation realtor, they kind of cover all areas, but who's to say they're an expert in every area? And when I went from northern Westchester to Scarsdale, I really saw the quality that the story was being told a little bit better about the community in Scarsdale. But like, for example, Edgemont, we have some great Edgemont agents, but most of the time the buy side is not always an agent that's from an Edgemont or a Scarsdale office. So usually the Edgemont agent, thank goodness they're accompanying, are actually the ones that are selling the Edgemont community, the Edgemont school district, or the Scarsdale school district sometimes. So that's another thing that's there. So the listing agents, that's why it's important even on accompanying showings that the listing agent's there, because sometimes they're the ones that really sell the product better than even the buyer's agent does.
So let's say now that a lawyer wants to represent himself, or another broker is telling me that he wants to represent a member of his family.
Okay.
So I don't know if he was going to live in the house himself or if he was just buying this for his sister. But
yep.
But so now he says, well, instead of paying me, just take the money off. Just take the money off the price. But we don't know what the price is until they've made an offer. So
exactly.
At what point do you negotiate this accommodation, if you will?
Well, I mean, you have to get into certain things. Is you start breaking down that, okay, so if you're going to be a full-blown buyer's agent, you're going to do due diligence for your client. You're going to send me a disclosure form showing me that you're a buyer's agency, that you're a buyer's agent. And are you going to do the full-fledged everything, or what do you want to do? Or you just want to do a referral fee, and this way you have some transaction money that can go towards you because you're licensed, and we handle this on our side. We get a designated agent for this transaction, or do you want to get another agent? How do you want to work this out? Sometimes the person will just accept a referral fee and allow us to follow through the transaction because they're not going to really represent this client to the fullest. They want someone to go and do the due diligence for the client and verify the information like the CO and everything else. They want someone to be there for the inspection because they can't be there for the inspection. They want someone there to handle the negotiations. They just want to be able to get their fee or referral fee because they have a license.
So I think from a recommendation point of view, it would be fair to say that you don't want somebody who just wants the fee. You want somebody who actually knows what they're doing and will do the work.
And do the work, yeah.
And from a buying negotiation point of view, if you have your brother-in-law is a lawyer and says, oh, look, I can, wink, wink, get you 1% off the purchase price, which you don't even know what that is because you haven't negotiated the purchase price yet. But yet that person is not doing the negotiation for you in a knowledgeable way with an idea about what the comps are in the neighborhood. You might actually wind up paying more than you otherwise would have.
Yeah, and that's like right now where the market is getting better and you're seeing for sale by owners all the time. You're thinking sellers are actually getting more money for their properties and because they're saving the commission, and that's not always the case. And also buyers who are approaching these for sale by owners, or these people who pay the flat fee just to get on the multiple listing, the buyer who now comes on his own, maybe doesn't have a representative, an agent. I can't tell you how many times I see buyers that bought houses in the boom times, like the 04, 05, 06 markets, that they come to us now and they want to list their homes, and they overpaid like hundreds of thousands of dollars on some of these homes, and some of these marketers maybe $50,000 more because they thought they were going to save money because there was no agent involved, and that's not always the case. They're not always saving the money by those circumstances.
I've had a number of seller clients who have tried to sell without a broker, and I find that it's very difficult for them to handle the negotiations. They don't know what's customary, so they wind up giving away a lot of terms that, or negotiating on a lot of terms that, just simply aren't customary. And I say, well, no, nobody does that, and I don't know why you're doing that. And the second problem is that because they're not using a broker, they are not availed of the wider group of buyers that they otherwise might be. So they're selling actually at a lower price. If they got a broker and paid the commission, they'd still wind up with more in their pocket. And that has happened to several of my clients, that they've decided to go with brokers, and they've wound up at the end of the day with more money in their pockets as a result. And less aggravation. I can't even begin to imagine having to clean out my closets and show the place myself. It'd be too horrible. So we're getting ready to take another break, and then we'll be right back and talk about how to prepare your house to sell. Okay, we're back with Empower Hour and my guest, Jason Wilson. Hi, Jason.
How are you doing, Susan?
Okay, so Jason, let's make sure everybody has your phone number.
914-713-2164. Julie B. Fee Sotheby's in Scarsdale.
Now, if anybody wants to call in, ask Jason a question, the number today is 914-693-5700, 693-5700. And if you need to get me at my office, it's 914-948-1400. So, Jason, in addition to doing a lot of real estate work, I do a lot of divorce work, and very common, and mediation, and very common for people splitting up and transitioning families to be selling the house. And I think now with this rising market, hot market, if you will, in Westchester particularly, people who have been waiting to sell, waiting for the market to improve, a lot of people now are getting ready to sell. So there are things that you can do to your house that make it more easily saleable, but what would you do to do that, and what would you not do to throw money away, to waste money?
Well, I think first things first is before you do anything, and I've done these consultations a lot for the clients, is coming in and actually looking at exactly, sometimes customers have this big punch list of what they think needs to be done, and then I go in and look at it as they don't really need to do everything they say that's there, especially depending on the condition of the home. So, for example, I went and saw a house, and the kitchen was outdated, the bathrooms were outdated, and the guy came with me with like a 20-point list of everything that he was going to do in the house, and I said, don't waste your time. Don't waste your time on this 20-point list. What you need to do is declutter the house, okay? You need to get rid of all the clutter and take these rooms down and make them not look as full and flourishing as they were before. You need to patch that ceiling there with the old leak that has to do with the roof that used to leak there. Take that, but just don't do the square. Make sure you paint the whole ceiling, because then it looks like you have the problem there.
But don't you have to paint the whole house?
Not necessarily, not in this house. This house, it was just the ceiling that needed to be painted. We went over some areas that needed to be touched up. There was some outside landscaping work that had to be done, some masonry work, and that was really about it, because the problem is that when you already opened up Pandora's box, and what really needed to be done was now going to come up to the new buyer that was going to buy the home anyway. So it would have been a waste of money to start gutting bathrooms. It would have been a waste of money to start doing kitchens and swapping out appliances and everything. And I had another house where I had a client, they really...
Wait, I just want to stop you for a minute, because I want to make sure our listeners understand what you're saying. So if you're not updating bathrooms and you're not updating kitchens, it's because you think a new buyer is going to do that anyway. So why would you put something in just to have them rip it out?
Exactly.
Okay, but isn't that going to affect your listing price and what you could sell it for?
Well, what I usually try to do is I give them a as-is price and what it's going to be after if they go and put that stuff in. The problem with kitchens and baths, and depending on the price points that you're in, you can go and invest in a $4,000 for a granite countertop or a certain type of cabinet, and it's all going to be lost money. When you start getting into material costs and labor, and especially things like kitchens and baths, usually in this type of market, you're not going to fully get that back. The only way you get that back is in personal enjoyment, just like going on vacation. You go away for, and it costs $5,000 for a vacation. The week is over. You don't ask for a refund. It's the same thing when you go put the patio, the pool in, or whatever. You're never going to get that stuff back.
So this 20 points that this seller had for you, those were 20 points that were for him, what he would have wanted, not necessarily what a buyer would want.
Yeah, what he thought from, watching HGTV and TLC, or what he thought needed to be done to this house before it went on the market.
Okay.
And when they were very happy after me sitting down with them for over an hour and us going through everything, because the list wasn't as large. Now, they did need a container because they had to get rid of a lot of stuff they've been packing for the years.
Okay, when you say container, you mean a dumpster?
A dumpster, yes.
Okay, so you have to hire a dumpster. You can't just... Right? You have to, rent it. It's expensive.
Yeah, you rent a dumpster, but, there's two versions. You can either get, Got Junk or the junk luggers, where you get the labor and the dumpster, but that's usually a smaller dumpster, and sometimes they donate it, but it depends on what you need. But I always tell the story of when I moved out of my mom's house, I got a 20-yard dumpster, and I basically dumped the whole house, and it was a great feeling for my mom, and it was so much stuff that we got rid of. My sister moved back in and loaded the place all back up, but at least it was great just to get it off out in one shot, because when you're doing a purge like this to really make the house pop, you need a dumpster, because that's the only way you're going to get rid of a lot of bulk in a short amount of time. Where you're going to do bulk pickup and everything else, you're never going to get those pieces out. If you want to do a full, real purge on a house and really get rid of everything, you got to get a container, nice size one, and you'll be amazed on how much you'll fill that thing up.
Okay. So next, you were saying you don't want to spend a lot of money on stuff people don't like, and you want to declutter. And I think people have a lot of trouble getting rid of stuff. Do you need some help doing that?
Yeah, there's different types of companies out there. There's, home stagers that you can work with. A home stager's job is to take the personality out of the house. They're not trying to offend you to take down the pictures of grandma and grandpa and your kids and everything like that. They're just asking you to depersonalize it, because what it is it's a distraction. I always tell the story about when I was working with a buyer one day, and I used to be an old wrestling fan, and I saw pictures of Hulk Hogan and this guy and that guy, and me and the buyer were more distracted on looking at the photography or looking at the, sports memorabilia than actually looking at the house. That when the agent said, "What was the feedback from your seller?" Well, the kid's room was really cool. That's all I can really say right now, because I forgot what the rest of the house looked like.
I have to tell this little story. When my husband and I bought the house that we have been living in now for, over 30 years, when we first went in, there was a picture on black velvet over the fireplace with a ceramic matador and bull in orange on the black velvet. And my husband took one look at that and said, "I can't buy this house." And I said, "Don't look at it. We're going to take that, throw it away." But you're right. It's very distracting. And it gives you a feeling about the house having sort of a personality.
Exactly.
And you don't want the house to have its own personality. You want it to have your personality.
Yeah, I mean, we had a situation. This is when me and my wife were buying. This was like many, many years ago, where I found out information that the wife had passed away. So they said, they gave us this information because they said there's 3 men living in the house, or should I say 3 young boys and a father. So it was 4 guys living in the house. So it's going to probably be a little messy. We just want to give you a heads up. Okay, no problem. So I'm having a problem with the lockbox. We go into the property, and the person that opens up the door winds up being the same woman who's at the top of the stairs in the wedding photo. Now, the wife passed away. So as I'm walking through the house, I said, either we saw a ghost or this woman is alive. So I get it, I'm all done with the appointment, whatever. And I went to the agent and I said, listen, can you do me a favor? I don't know if you have your story correct, because unless this woman has a twin sister, the woman in the wedding photo was the one that answered the door. She was like, oh yeah, I just found out this morning. The wife is not dead. She actually left to the Dominican Republic with her boyfriend, and to his mind, the husband's mind, she was dead. So my listing agreement's really not valid, and I have to get it now signed this weekend by the wife.
I see. Well, which brings us to the other issue of, if you have 2 owners on the property, you have to have 2 signatures on the listing agreement. And if you can't get 2 signatures on the listing agreement, then you don't have a listing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Some people are not really clear on that, and I have had a number of people come in who are contemplating divorce and tell me that they are going to list the house, that they themselves individually are going to list the house. And I explained to them that not only can they not do that if there are 2 names on the house, both people have to list it, but in fact, if it is the marital home, it is the better practice, even if the home is only in 1 name, to have both names on the listing agreement, because there is a beneficial ownership often, unless there's a prenuptial agreement. There's a beneficial ownership in the spouse whose name is not listed. And they can come in with a court order to stop the sale in many cases. So you don't want to be doing that, because it's a lot of work for nothing, and you're going to own a commission to a broker, and you don't make the sale. So that is very annoying, to owe somebody 5% of money that you didn't get.
So I have a good question for you. I have a question for you.
All right.
This happened to me the other day. We have a seller client who has dementia or a possible Alzheimer's.
I hate that.
And she signed 2 listing agreements with 2 different companies. Whose agreement's valid?
Yeah. See, I have clients every once in a while with dementia, and I have to explain to people that we need somebody who's more on the ball. So we need somebody to be appointed a guardian for that person. Or there are a lot of people who say, well, if they have a lucid moment, they can sign something in a lucid moment. But I like more than actually a moment. I like to see, a lot of lucid moments in a doctor's note, or I like to see a guardian appointed. I like to see better than that, because I think you have a problem.
And if I was to bring you a contract, let's go back to the divorce situation, and I have 2 agreements, and I have basically 2 signature pages, but I wasn't able to get them in the same room to sign both.
Those
at
are
the same
called
time.
counterpart agreements. And generally a contract that is signed in counterparts. We've done this before we had electronic media. We used to have to get people to sign in different places. And so each one would send back a signature page. I don't love that, because you don't see the whole document. But if you can show that the rest of the document is exactly the same, and generally those contracts will say this document may be signed in counterparts.
Okay.
That's perfectly legal.
Okay.
Especially if there's full disclosure each to the other, which I presume there is.
Yeah, there is, yeah. Yeah, we had a situation. It was not divorce. It was 3 members of the family owned it, and it came from 3 different parts of the world, the contract. So
that's very common.
And basically I have 3 actual agreements that all have a signature from each of the people.
That's very common. And it was now, though, which my preference is to circulate the document by email. Have them print it out, sign it, and send it back, so that you'll have electronic photocopies, but all in the same document.
Yep.
So I'm very big on
One last
technology.
thing. What do you think on a state level? Do you think that will go full electronic? How many more years out will you think you'll be at a closing where someone will do a fingerprint and a signature on an iPad and we're done?
In New York State?
Yeah.
Forever.
No, you don't think we'll ever be electronic?
First of all, many other states don't even use lawyers to do closings, and we're still using lawyers to do closings. So if you're still using lawyers to do closings when so many other states do not, how much longer will it take to progress past that? I don't know. I mean, I have to say that I find that our particular system, I think, has the best system of security for the client, but at the same time, it is the least progressive in my experience.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people who profit from less progress. So you're going to have a big fight on your hands with them.
Mm-hmm.
We have one more minute. Oh, we have not quite one more minute. So I guess what I'm going to ask you is, before anybody does anything to get their house ready for sale, they should ask the broker before wasting money.
Yep.
Okay. And do you have any parting advice for anybody getting ready to sell a house today?
You can call me anytime if you're using me or not using me anywhere. Westchester County, 914-713-2164 for free advice.
Well, that is quite a generous offer.